Transportation, outgoing services on your Airtel mobile will expire today, and the outgoing will be stopped. Continue this service. We are live. Recharge.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to SITSI 2022. Very, very warm welcome. Good morning to all of you, all the participants. We have a one-day program on SITSI 2022. We just thought it was, about 3 months ago when we got together and huddled together on what to do with SITSI. We thought it will be good to have definitely maintain continuity over the years. And so we thought we'll have a bridge of a one-day workshop conference on SITSI 2022 so that we can keep some continuity in building a community. The purpose of the SITSI is really to build a community of citizens, practitioners, workers, contributors, scientists, and people who are interested in SITSI. And it's very, very important to build a community to have peer-to-peer relationships, contacts and connects between all the participants here. And so I request you to kind of participate wholeheartedly, interact with the speakers, interact among each other through the Discord channel, and cultivate a community. Yes, we should have a very good, vibrant community. We need to get on to a face-to-face meeting of SITSI. We will do that as soon as we can, possibly next year, and so that we can meet and greet each other in person. Thank you very much for joining the SITSI 2022, and a very, very warm welcome. And enjoy yourselves. Feel free to express yourselves through the Discord. Thank you very much. Shannon, you want to introduce yourself, Shannon?
Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Shannon Olson. I'm a faculty at NCF TFR in Bengaluru. I'm also the director of the ECHO Network and also a special scientific envoy to India with the Danish Academy of Technical Sciences. This is my favorite conference. I always say that, and I'm so happy to have you all here. We have a wonderful day ahead of us, starting with a fantastic keynote. So I hope you'll all join us. And the best part of this conference is always the interactions that we have. So please join Discord if you haven't done already. Join in the discussions. We have some nice polls in the lounge to answer with some interesting responses. And we hope you'll be very active participants, because it's really what is needed to build our community so we can learn from each other and share experiences with each other. So Farida, maybe you can introduce yourself.
Very good morning, everyone. So happy to be back again at the third annual SITSI conference. Really exciting day ahead. Lots and lots of interesting talks, and then a panel discussion in the evening. So I'm sure all of you are raring to go for today. I'm at the WWF India Hyderabad office. I head the office for Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, and really keen that we have many more such exciting SITSI projects in these two states as well. So always a learner forever. So waiting to learn from all of you, and I will hand over to Akshata for introducing us.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the third annual conference. It's always nice to be here and be interacting with all of you. I am currently the head of research at the ECHO Network and also coordinating this conference with the help of all of them present on the screen right now, and also a few very, very important people who are not present here at the moment. So hope you all have a good time, and please reach out to us on Discord if there's anything we can help you with. Thank you so much and enjoy. Over to you, Suhail.
Yeah, thanks, Akshata. Hi, everybody. My name is Sohail. I work with the Nature Conservation Foundation. And like everybody said, really excited that we're on the third annual conference for citizen science on biodiversity in India. And thanks to all who've come back from the previous conferences, and also to those who've come afresh for the first time. We've chosen this particular mode of online interaction. Firstly, we continue to interact online in this conference, partly because we think it makes it more accessible to people all over the country. It's harder to travel in person. But of course, that means that the interaction isn't as close as it could be online versus physical. So let's think during the course of today and in the future, what to do next year, whether we should have this online or in person, and your thoughts are very welcome on this. We have, I think, a mix of people who are practitioners of citizen science, who design and run projects, citizen science projects. There are a number of people who are participants in citizen science, who contribute their time and efforts to citizen science. There are also people who very crucially take the information that's gathered from citizen science projects and convert that into knowledge. So do analyses, ask research questions, and convert all of this into something new that we can all learn from. And so we hope to interact with all of you. We've switched from Slack to Discord because Discord seems to be a more long-term solution for this. We will, I think, be keeping our Discord server like live and current all through the year. So we're hoping that the Discord server and the channels within it can serve as a more continuous forum for interaction and discussion, not just for the course of during the course of the conference alone. Citizen science, as you know, is kind of nascent in India, just starting out. The community is still small, and like with any small communities, we have to stick together. We have to learn from each other. We have to support each other, and for that, we need some kind of forum or platform. And we're hoping that this can be it. That's it, Akshata. Do we have any thing else?
I think we should just say a huge thank you to Akshata, who has really been leading this effort and coordinating it and doing a fantastic job, along with Tamizan and Amit, who have been excellent behind the scenes, getting our website going, and also they're doing all of the streaming and the Discord work right now. So just especially to them, and I'd also like to thank my co-organizers for working together, again, planning this year. And please do, everybody in the audience, reach out to us if you have any questions or suggestions for improvement. Sorry, Suhail, I just want to make sure to thank Akshata, especially because she's really a wonder.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you, Shannon. And I think we're good to go, Sohail.
We'll be embarrassing Akshata and others towards the end of the conference as well, I'm sure. So good, we're at 10 o'clock now, and time to start our first event of the day, which is a talk by Yuvan. And it is my great honor and pleasure to introduce Yuvan to all of you. Yuvan's a unique kind of person. I think there's no two ways about that. He's largely self-educated, which in itself is something really unusual. From the age of 16 or so, he's essentially charted his own path in the world. He's a nature educator, a writer, and a fierce advocate for the environment. He's also the founder of the Pulicat Trust, which works in nature education, research, and advocacy. And from my interactions with Yuvan, I know that he reads deeply and widely and brings this breadth and depth to his own writings, both to the many articles he has written as well as his 3 books with a 4th on the way. And because of this depth of expertise and breadth of expertise, he's also, I think, advises and consults with a large number of organizations across the country that care about similar things. He's won various awards, and there's lots more that one can be said about Yuvan, more than should be possible to say about somebody as young as him. But I think his wisdom and his clarity of thought will inspire all of us today. So thank you for joining us, Yuvan, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on citizen science for education and advocacy. Over to you.
Thank you, Sohail, because when I accepted to do this talk, I'm excited to speak about citizen science, but at the same time, I saw all the sponsors and all big universities and stuff. I have literally no academic qualifications, but I think Suhail's introduction has put me at rest. So thank you for that. So I'm going to share my screen. And somebody tell me if it is working.
Yes, you just have to make it full screen.
Full screen? Okay.
Perfect.
So I want to cover 3 things today. First is how we have been able to use citizen science to protect places, species, and so on. I want to share a few stories about that. Second thing, I want to share a couple of stories about how citizen science could be used to transform education and education pedagogy. And in the end, drawing some threads between citizen science platforms and practices and climate action, and a few proddings in that direction. And I understand a whole lot of people are watching this. I think people who facilitate these platforms, as well as teachers and students and so on. So I want to end with a little instigations, gentle instigations in that direction. Yeah. So let me start off. Yeah. So my first story is about this place. I'm not a great photographer. Okay. So, the photos are a bit blurry, but it's a beautiful place. It's the Yedayantittu estuary. It's next to the Alampara Fort in North Tamil Nadu. And biodiversity wise, it's a beautiful place. In fact, I think the Great North was sighted here recently. And the great-tailed tattler, this is the only other place in India it has been sighted in, if I'm not mistaken. It has been sighted in Pulicat Lake as well. And I go here, I've been here on some years to count birds. And often it's a very, I don't like going to this place because a few thousand pintails sitting in one place. And that specific place, they have this habit of switching from one place to the other and mixing up. And so counting them is a big problem. There's the Asian Waterfall Census, the Citizen Science Initiative, which happens every January. And sometimes I'm sent here and I'm like, no, please, somewhere else where the birds sit in one place and don't fly off. So you see thousands of, brown-headed gulls. Here you can see the lesser sand plovers, among other birds. And the estuary on either side, we from our data shows that turtles nest there. About 36,000 hatchlings on either side of the estuary have been collected and transferred to hatcheries. And it has mangroves, it has seagrass, salt marshes, and so on. So currently, the threat to this place is that the fisheries department has proposed 2 fishing harbors inside the estuary. Yeah. So what that means is the estuary has to be dredged, the existing, places where waders sit. There are also a lot of local people dependent on the oyster reefs growing on this estuary. Very interestingly, there's no research on oyster reefs, little research on oyster reefs in India, but they have, as much value and diversity, and it's comparable to coral reefs. But then, as such, they are very unsung. They also look kind of craggy, shaggy, dirty, and algal. So I think the human mind finds coral reefs a little more, appealing. But these places are currently under threat. And what happened was, without a proper clearance, if you want to build something, you need a clearance. The place was started to be dug out, and then a road was built. So we went and filed a case in the court. Yeah. And let me switch to the slide. My slide has shifted, right? Everybody thumbs up for that. My slide has changed.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we put together all kinds of data. And this is a court battle which is currently going on. We spoke about turtles, bird diversity, the seagrass, the local people, other than the large trawler owners who want to, who are pushing for the harbor there. Sperm whales are known to breed within 60 kilometers from the estuary, where there is a kind of underwater hillock. And a lot of local fisher folk come and say that, sperm whales are a way of bird sleeping. They don't, their blowholes are on their forehead as such, compared to other whales where it's right on the back. So sperm whales have this tendency to kind of vertically hang in the water and bob up and down and kind of chill out. That has been cited a lot of times off this shore. The hearing we had last week, something very interesting happened, and when Sohail asked me to give this talk, that's the first thing which came to my head. I said, yes, I want to do this. And so the judge sat and we pointed out to the bird diversity that we thought, with our lawyer, we're going to push that specifically on that hearing. And the the judge sat with the EIA done by one Cholamandalam Risks. EIA is an environmental impact assessment. You want to build something anywhere, you have to assess what kind of impacts will happen on environment and people in all its various, complexities, and present it. And these are done very, very badly in India. I am yet to come upon a EIA. This is like one of my full-time things I do, looking at EIAs of different projects. I'm yet to come across somewhere where very good data, especially with respect to biodiversity, has been presented. Yeah. So in that place, the EIA said there are 49 species, very common ones. It was done over something like 2 days. And then side by side, the judge sat with the eBird data from that place, which showed 165 species with the counts. He could see the pintails, which were seen in the thousands, the little stints again in thousands, pelicans in hundreds, all of that. And he asked the respondents, who are the Fisheries Ministry, the Coastal Zone Management Authority, he said, what is this? Why is the EIA done so badly? This place is a bird hotspot. Yeah. Can you give me an answer to that? And it was a very powerful argument for us in fighting for this area, this eBird list. And to think about it, who contributed to this? Everybody. It was not by one scientific institution, one entity, anybody. But as such, the battle, the contributions to it, the backbone to it is all kinds of people, right? From college students who come there, children who put sightings on eBird, to everybody. And, at the least, this eBird list would make us put up a good fight. And at the most, it would perhaps help us win this place. And one of the things we are pushing for is that it is linked to the bird sanctuary, which has been declared nearby, or some kind of protection is given to the place because of its avifauna and other kinds of richness. Yeah. So that's my first story. My second story is kind of a complicated map. I'm going to explain. Yeah. My second story is from Pulicat Lake. It's again in the northern part of Chennai. It's in fact the Yennur Pulicat wetlands, spread over about 8,000 acres, is Chennai's most important flood catchment and drainage system. Yeah. So the Kosastalaya River flows through here, and then it becomes a different animal. It starts spreading, it starts shooting out in various ways. It has 3 estuaries here, and then it finally goes and fills up the Pulicat Lagoon. Yeah. And then Pulicat Lagoon is a sheltered, marine space. Is different from the ocean. Sheltered marine spaces are where fish and marine life and birds come in order to either feed, breed. Yeah. Where the waves velocity is much less and dampened. Yeah. Now here, interestingly, has been the place of historical kind of exploitation of both the ecology as well as the people, because traditionally, largely, so-called low-caste people live there, working class communities live here, fisher folk, Irula tribes, and so on. So if you look at all of Chennai's red category industry, dirty industries, the power stations, fertilizer industries, petrochemical refineries, all of that are placed in North Chennai, not because it's a good site. It's actually a bad site. It's an extremely watery landscape. So any kind of pollution there kind of spreads everywhere. Yeah. But because the communities there don't have the political will to kind of fight against them. So the latest here is a massive port proposed by the Marine Infrastructure Development Private Limited. It's under the Adani conglomerate. And it's a 6,111 acre port, largely a commercial port. And 3,000 acres of this is, they say reclaiming ocean. Very interestingly, with climate change, ocean is reclaiming us. But for the port, if you look at their paper, they say they're going to reclaim 3,000 acres of ocean and build their port there. On this Kattupalli Island, which is a sand barrier island, which makes Pulicat what it is. It is the sheltering entity of that sheltered marine space. And what happens is that when you build hard coastal structures, if you read oceanography, on the eastern coast, on the north there's erosion, on the south there is accretion of sand. Yeah. So in the north, ocean starts to come in. Maybe if there's time, we can discuss that a little further. So in order to campaign against this among the various activities, citizen science initiative was actually taken up by 13 villages here, upon which the port is kind of square placed upon. Yeah. And the citizen science activity was this: the EIA of the project proponents said that this is all barren land, there's nothing here. Yeah. So there's no problem. Let us build our port. But then the fisher folk did two kinds of citizen science activities. They compiled all their traditional knowledge, and of course a few people helped map this out. In the ocean, they in Chennai, North Tamil Nadu, fisherfolk have a way of classifying ocean beds into different habitats. There's Tara, sandy ocean; Para, reef or rock; and then Ser, which is clayey, slushy areas, which is the most economically good ones. Where there's a lot of prawn, crab, and so on. Sandy places, you find things like soulfish, halibut, guitar fish, and so on. And what they did was, in the ocean, they mapped, and they have specific places in the ocean where they identify these clay, slushy areas. And this was mapped. Yeah. And so you can see here, anybody who can read Tamil here, see Alamara Sere, Lakku Sere, Kalanji Sere. These are all different slushy areas in the ocean, which is very rich in marine life. Yeah. And then what they did was, in the wetlands, which they said, hey, the project proponent said, hey, there's nothing here. They actually mapped out, and this is largely by one village called Korakupam, where they mapped out where are the flamingo foraging areas, where are the grazing areas, where are the farming areas or commons, like wetlands where people go catch prawn and crabs and so on. Yeah. And this was a very powerful argument for the campaign. No global platform of citizen science was used as such, but the process of citizen science was used. And the process here being that citizen science is to first acknowledge that normal people, general public, right from the fisher folk to the farmer to the prawn catcher to me, a teacher to a student, has important scientific knowledge based on their lived experiences and the possibilities of their lived experience. And the second thing being that they are capable, contribute powerfully, and engage in knowledge making, which is valuable. Yeah. And these two are kind of the pillars for me for the practice of citizen science. Yeah. Let me go to a couple of more examples where this could be used in a educational scenario. So I'm largely a nature educator, and I'm constantly looking at how I can directly connect the child to the real world. Yeah. And this philosophy of science, one of the things I tell them, class 7, class 8, we do citizen science modules. Children learn how to use eBird, iNaturalist, Season Watch, all of that, how to use I found butterflies. Firstly, as a kind of identification for their own research, and then to contribute. And then later on, ways of using information from here for some sort of a messaging. Yeah. Like the examples I gave you. Yeah. Here, what children decided to do was they wanted to map mongooses. Now, the way I start this module is that this is citizen science. You have to, normal people are your source of knowledge or contributors to your knowledge, and you have to record that in some way, and then you have to give it back or make it available back to them. And I often tell children that the genesis of science, when we study the history of science, There is, Lavoisier finding the microscope and somebody finding the atom. I think the genesis of science was citizen science, community coming together, creating knowledge together. I think that history of science needs to be rewritten. Yeah. And it's in those ways that knowledge, most accessible and valuable, even historically, came into being. And from there, uh, industrial capitalistic interests kind of merged with scientific interests and took it to other places. I'm not judging it in any way, but it took different turns. But it's important, perhaps, I think, to be acknowledge that citizen science was the genesis of any science. Yeah. I want to tell you two stories about how you could use this in schools. So different groups of children decide that these are the things they are interested in generally, and there's something they would like to investigate. And then we look into, okay, what is your question? How will you gather this data? What form will you do it in? And then how will you put it in a form such that you can make sense out of it? And then how will you make it available again? So this group of boys, the class 7 boys, they said, sir, when I was young, I used to see a lot of mongooses around my house. Mongoose or mongooses, I don't know. Yeah, mongooses, I call it for some now. Yeah. Um, and they said, now I don't see them any longer. And can we do a citizen science project about that? I said, yes, fantastic. How will you do it? So, okay, I'll ask people, did you see mongoose? And then, I'll decide. Then how will you present it? Okay, I'll put it on a map. Yeah. So they made a Google form, spread it around, took, I think, about 60 or 70 data points. And then they had a way of asking, people could attach pictures, they see it with offspring or without offspring, all of that within a certain time range. At that point, I think it was done a little more than a year ago. And they plotted it. And very interestingly, they found most of the plots fell around water bodies. This is interesting. I didn't know this about mongooses. Yeah. In Chennai, at least, all of these points, and I think they've updated this map 2 times after that. Um, all of these are falling around wetlands and water bodies, and that's an interesting thing. Even perhaps a contribution. In fact, some of the literature review they did in order to come up with this format, they didn't. It did not have any correlation between mongooses preferring water bodies. Yeah. Another, slightly humanities based citizen science approach. This was a group of 3 girls. They wanted to um, understand how people are still connected with their home culture. Yeah. And it was interesting why they wanted to do it, based on some of their family experiences and everything. And they want to understand, okay, how are you still connected to your mother tongue? Do you still wear your traditional clothes? Do you go back to your hometown and so on? And they came up with this, and I think they collected data from almost 200 people from within the school community and slightly around. And they found some very interesting things about how one of the things which stood out for me from their project was that people who are away from their culture actually practice it more in a more yearning, in a more passionate way than people kind of completely within the culture where different kinds of conflicts are happening. That was interesting thing to me, and it seemed to reflect some sort of my own reality as such. Yeah. And after they put this together, I've just shown 2 pages from their project. They put this together and shared it with everybody who contributed to their project. So as such, the beautiful thing about the process of citizen science is reciprocity, is mutual benefit, is some sort of this egalitarian playing ground, where there is no scientific elite, and in conventional science as such, there is the people who do science and the people on whom science is done. As such, in this practice and process of thinking, that is beautifully dismantled. Yeah. 1 second. Yep. So my previous two examples were from a program I run called Farm Environment Society for a school here in Chennai. Now, this is an internship I run for 3 colleges in Chennai, and it's about a 6-month internship. And its intention is to create powerful, impactful nature educators, who can later on see if they want to do this in a way which they can carry forward. Yeah. As educators, especially nature educators, we face certain challenges. In some places when I go, definitely not in this conference, but in other places when I go and speak, I'm the only guy speaking my language. And a lot of people look at me like I'm some, strange zoo animal, speaking some other, all kinds of things. And that lack of cognition about some of these, issues and practices often is a challenge. Now, similarly, for people who practice, these things, it could be conservation education, it could be, citizen science. One of the key things, even educational research says, is a challenge is social influence. Yeah. For instance, in my own life, if I were to share, I was interested in nature very, very early. But I remember many years where I would consciously kind of suppress it because this interest in nature became a sort of a weird thing about me. It's like going and looking for birds, or when no other of my classmates um, had the same interest, or had opportunities to kind of let that interest grow as such, because I've never seen any child under 7 or 10 not interested in nature. It's kind of spontaneous, the biophilia which E.O. Wilson coined. So social influence is a big kind of determining factor if whether one can proceed in this direction or not. And one of the things I'm seeing, so this internship requires, so there are different kinds of citizen science projects they have to take up as assignments. One is to clock from their locality 50 different species they see around them. And then there's one more and there's one more. Yeah. And one unexpected thing I found is that citizen science helps build this sort of a social network as such. People are sometimes as addicted, perhaps in a good way, to iNaturalist as they are to Facebook, looking at the various things and hiding stuff. I think that's a very core determining factor. There needs to be some sort of a social cohesion, for this to kind of gain momentum, and for people who are engaged in this to do this passionately. And I saw that work in this internship, especially when there was a citizen science project, because it was a clique and a group, and that's nice. Yeah. And the second thing is that any sort of some values we learn in programs like this needs something action based. If you put something on eBird, a list, or if you contribute to Season Watch, the interesting thing is it is action oriented. Yeah. And so when you bring it into an educational program, it becomes important because action creates forward commitment, not recipients, not sitting back and listening. Yeah. Now, I want to dwell a little more on how citizen science is able to, can help us imagine, transform education as such, schooling, college curriculum. Yeah. And there are many detriments to conventional education. I think a lot of you would be aligned with some of these. But specifically, I want to highlight passivity, which is about complete position of a consumer. So there is somebody who is delivering, like in this talk, but of course, I think there are different formats to this conference, which will not be constant. Yeah. But in a traditional classroom setup, there's somebody who's delivering, and then the learners are treated as inert material into whom you need to push stuff in. Yeah. So there's a disconnect there. And there's interesting research showing that when you practice this for 10,000 hours, 12,000 hours, you create a certain kind of citizen who is highly trained in apathy. So things may be happening around, trees may be getting cut or some sort of, issues on your own street. And if you ask somebody, hey, it's happening, why don't you do something about it? You say, oh, nobody told me. Oh, I wasn't informed, or it's not my work. Yeah. So that builds a cultural passivity, which capitalism thrives upon. Yeah. And then most relevant to the role of citizen science is isolation from local and real world issues. Yeah. Now, with my team and I in Palloy Trust, currently something we are intensely working on is climate curriculum. Yeah. Now, for the Chennai North Tamil Nadu area, in a way in which it is locally relevant, in a way in which it is relevant to the working class child from the working class background, as well as the upper middle class, the privileged backgrounds. Yeah. And we did a vast amount of research as to, okay, we are creating this climate curriculum. It needs to be linked to biodiversity and social justice. Now, what are the things I have to keep in mind in my lesson planning such that it becomes meaningful and impactful? Now, I'll define that, what I mean by meaningful and impactful. Yeah. One is that we learn certain things. Yeah. Is that transferable into behaviors and practices and values in my life and in my engagement with my near and local and non-local society? Yeah. Is it transferable? Or does it just stay in my head and in the books and the exam papers? Yeah. That is one thing. Second thing is it linked deeply to ecological and human well-being? That being at the center. Now, not economic well-being, not political, not religious or whatever. In some sense, is what we are learning building or deepening human and ecological well-being? Yeah. And we did a vast amount of literature on this. So how do we design such a curriculum? Yeah. I'll show you one paper. We looked through dozens of papers which helped us formulate this. And this is a very important table. It's from a paper called Childhood Pathways to Adult Environmentalism. Yeah. It's the sample size of people for this study is 2000. It's Western, doesn't mean it's not relevant in India. It looked at, okay, what kind of childhood experiences lead to some kind of behaviors, values, practices in the adult, in the environmental ecological scenario. Maybe they are donating to some cause. Maybe they are involved in some sort of activism. I know activism is becoming a bad word, but I think it should be legitimized as a word to use. Or they are having some sort of personal practice around this. Yeah. So if you look at childhood experiences in observing or immersion in wild nature, there is a very strong correlation. Domesticated nature and so on. If you look at environmental education, where people study and then write an exam, it has, and whether they pass or fail or whatever in the exam, it has zero correlation with the adult developing environmental values. This is a very important thing which we come upon again and again. This has been replicated in various parts of the world in different ways and forms. Yeah. And this is something we need to highlight, and I'll link this back to citizen science. Yeah. Curriculum, which is purely cerebral without real world engagement, has no value to us, to larger society, to other ecosystems, nothing. Yeah. And what leads to real, the development of these values is early childhood. There are some papers where if there are few deep immersive experiences, early childhood experiences with biodiversity, and this I'm quoting from a paper by somebody called Louis Chawla, that's it, finished. Some sort of environmental values are developed because that's one of the most formative parts of the child's growth. Yeah. So there needs to be three things in our teaching and learning curriculum space pedagogy. One is direct experience and action, which means there is observing of the real thing or some data collection, conversations, action. You can think of various ways in which you can create direct experience and action. Yeah. Relevance means relevance to my locality, relevance to my lived reality, other sorts of things. Yeah, my culture and so on. And interconnectedness between different disciplines, um uh, connectedness between different people in different fields. Yeah. Now I'm saying all this because when you include a citizen science pedagogy in school, all these things are covered. Yeah. And that makes it very, very powerful for young people, especially, to develop conservation values, advocacy values, I think, which are very important things, uh, uh, and a sense of agency, and the things happening. I'm not a passive consumer in where I live, but a thinking, informed, active person. Yeah. And through my in the ways in which I've been able to link citizen science, I've seen all these three pillars come actively into play. And that is something very important to highlight. Yeah. Um, Moving a little bit into climate action. Yeah. You look at all the climate literacy programs which work around the world. There are some good reports on this. One is Not Just Hot Air by UNESCO. UNESCO usually doesn't produce good reports, but this one's a good one on their own efforts and where things have worked, where they have not, and so on. Um, Citizen science is a powerful lens and link into climate action. So for instance, if one project is able to build the lens of uh, climate and how that specific project is linked to climate. For instance, let's say in January, the Asian waterfall censuses will start, and all this data will go into eBird. In the messaging of that, if one can build a climate lens, okay, wetlands, migratory birds, how are they impacted by climate change? What are some things I can keep my eyes open to while I'm going and counting birds in wetlands, waterfowl? Um, if one were to build that, it would be very powerful, because the pedagogy of citizen science covers all three pillars, which makes a powerful climate literacy program. So if one were to build a climate lens into any kind of citizen science, initiative, I think it would lead to uh, a very accessible, uh, tangible, impactful climate action in a diversity of ways. Yeah. And this is some of the literature we're going through. This is not to kind of present, but to just kind of tell you that there are a lot of links between citizen science initiatives and good climate literacy and action. Yeah. I want to end with some questions. Yeah. Which I'm thinking about and I want to share in this forum. Um, First is, could citizen science, I have to change that question. It is, how can we add climate lenses to various things, be it trees, birds, be it things we do on iNaturalist, all of that, uh, to trigger local and large scale climate action. I think uh, that's a central thing I'm exploring and would love to, if there is some form of discussion or collaboration on it, I'll be jumping to join it. Second thing, how can existing citizen science platforms, different ways to build a climate lens in their efforts? A related question. Yeah. Then how can we train young people to use citizen science in advocacy and change making? There are beautiful examples from all over the world. For instance, there is a new Ramsar site several years ago, declared in British Columbia. I think it was expanded over 40 times because eBird data showed that there are more birds sitting outside the protected area than inside, and it was decided to expand it. Similarly, there was a legislation passed in the parks of Florida, I think, where rails and crickets were nesting. I said you can't fly drones there purely from eBird data. And I can tell you a whole bunch of places where we have used citizen science data. For instance, there was a road proposed here in a place in Chennai called Adyar Estuary. And we used eBird data and iNaturalist data to show that there's so much life living there. The Chennai Corporation said there's just barren land again. I often say barrenness is always a state of mind, never a state of land. And citizen science comes to our aid to prove that. We were able to shelve that project. It has kind of resurfaced after several years, but it's a powerful campaign tool. Similarly, in a bird sanctuary called Vedandangal, where a pharmaceutical company was kind of trying to expand into it, and government tried to denotify. It's India's first bird sanctuary. The EIA by the project proponent showed 25 birds. We went and showed, if I'm not wrong, I think over 200 species of birds in the eBird data. And that was a very powerful media strategy as well as a public messaging strategy. Yeah. So can we look at citizen science as a powerful advocacy tool in ways in which it has been used and in new imaginative ways to train young people in this? Young people, old people, I mean, whoever. Yeah. Okay. And then how can the citizen science process and practice? The process meaning common people being important sources of knowledge making as well as contributors to science. And then the various global and local platforms that are for citizen science become a mainstream part of school and college curriculum in a way in which it is able to transform many of its detrimental eroding effects on I think, human culture. Yeah. I want to end with that. And I just want to summarize the 3 points I wanted to make. First is citizen science is a powerful advocacy tool. Citizen science allows for beautiful educational pedagogy. And citizen science could be a fantastic way to instigate local and large-scale climate action. That would be the end of my presentation. I'm happy for comments, questions, and so on.
Thanks a lot, Yuvan. Sorry, something wrong with my... Oh, there we go. Okay, the sun is shining really brightly over here. Hold on a second. There we are. All right. Thanks so much for that talk, Yuvan. That was wise and insightful, just as we had expected it to be, more so maybe. There's so many thoughts, I think, that your talk engenders. In my mind, I'm sure in many others, and I think others have also been saying here in Zoom and on the chat that this has been a wonderful talk. Let me just ask a couple of questions first from my end, and then we'll go to some of the questions that are coming in on Discord. I think just to say that I thought there were some really interesting points that you brought up. One is you said that, there's such an important principle of reciprocity in citizen science, that, information is collected and knowledge is generated, but then that has to go back as well to the community, to the people. That's really interesting. I also liked there's several quotable quotes. One was about barrenness as a state of mind, which has already been pointed out on the Discord channel. But also, I thought that you said that action creates forward commitment. I thought that was also a really insightful thing. And of course, action in itself maybe doesn't, but action plus some nudges and pushes and other sorts of things. And that's something that we always struggle with. No? How do we generate commitment? How do we generate consistent action, not just one-time action? I did want to ask you. There seem to be in your talk two parts of citizen science. One, citizen science as a knowledge generation tool, and then that knowledge can be used for things like advocacy, conservation, and so on. But more fundamentally, I think you described in the later part of your talk as citizen science as a fundamental educational tool. And of course, we want both of those, but is there also a tension between them? Or do you think that there is no differentiation to be made? that this is, any citizen science project can be simultaneously a knowledge generation and an educational tool, or there is some that might be, more on the one extreme and then others on the other extreme.
So if I were to reframe your question for myself, is that so the advocacy component and the educational component are that kind of interlinkages, and that's what you're asking, right?
Well, like for example, you've talked about eBird data and so on. So the bird watchers are going out there, and the reason eBird was created, by its creators was to understand birds better. Not necessarily to the primary motivation, not necessarily so that children can get more engaged, right? Although of course that is happening. But on the educational side, for example, you may not want to get children to only list birds and things like that. No, that's kind of a boring and not very pedagogical tool. You want children to engage in more creative and qualitative ways than, generating bird lists. So there is a bit of a tension, or there can be, between these two.
I think an important factor to consider there is the developmental planes of humans. Yeah. So if you look at early childhood, what Montessori framed as primary, it's important to create connections and love to other species through observation, through movement, through various other forms, in order for later forms of stewardship. Another way of saying advocacy is stewardship. One need not just firefight after something blows up. Even to care for later is maybe stewardship is a better word. So in that early childhood time, it's important to have these experiences in biodiversity. And there's a man called David Sobel. I love his work, and he's a nature educator, and he talks about how if I introduce gloom and doom and some threads of hostility which comes with some advocacy at an early age, then the child turns away from it, sees it as a threat, because that's the time when we as human beings form our personal and social safety. And then there is the elementary age group where the intellect grows and the abstraction in the mind starts to take place, and facts and intellectuals and concepts become a very important thing. Children come, some elementary children, they are fascinated to learn scientific names. The child came to me with a Grimmett book and said, all the raptors ask me any scientific names that I can tell you. So what's the point? No, it's okay, you ask me. That's the elementary. And then there is the adolescent age group where the social identity becomes very, very important. It's a time when one's selfhood expands, reimaginings happen. And there is a process called dispersal in the brain in every mammal, not just human, during adolescence, where it actually turns back, leaves the natal culture or the home, and looks back and starts naturally reimagining. Say, is this the culture I want to follow? What is obsolete? What is not? And that is the time where advocacy issues, children are receptive to, 14, 15, 16 and above, all of us as well. So I think the dynamic interlinkage there between the educational tool as well as the advocacy tool is to understand the position and needs of the human being, through school as well as in different. So I'm, I have certain locational privileges which allow me to go and fight these things. A court battle is a very, very strenuous thing, constantly to read things, what the other person files, and there are people, in certain occupations are not able to do that. If they can just be passionate about birds and contribute to it, that's in a certain equal sense, as valuable. I think those are the dynamics in that.
Yeah. Thanks, Yuvan. Thanks for that. There are a couple of questions in the on the Discord channel. Some of them are a little more tangential, maybe to your talk, and some more directly. I'll just maybe quickly one question from Aparajita, who says that, of course, the exposure to wild nature, makes a big difference. But what about scientists or ecologists who work with wild nature and the threats they face, but are still hesitant when it comes to advocacy and action? any insights, not really about your talk, but any insights about why such people whose work relates to this may not engage as much as, or what role they can play maybe apart from engaging directly?
Okay, so that's a tightrope question. I don't want to say anything.
Well, from your perspective, what would help you, for example?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I want to go back to one of the safe ways for answering this is I want to go back to the kind of values which we imbibe from a conventional schooling culture. And there are many. One of it is passivity. Do what you're told. Follow instructions. Don't think for yourself. Sit in your place. And let's say you grow into a conservation biologist through that. You're going to be waiting for instructions. I think there is something about the passivity culture which is able to either partially, wholly produce adults in different fields, not just this field, where there is a lack of agency and participation. I think I frame schooling there because the two most formative, neurobiologically speaking, formative parts of our growth happens one during the primary age group, another during the adolescence age group. And the influences we face during that time are very, very critical. And I think that plays a huge role in setting our worldviews, values, imaginings, which then play a role later in adulthood. I'm not saying we are kind of set and stuck there. It's possible to unlearn and relearn any time in life, but then those two are called sensitive periods, biologically speaking.
Thanks, Yuvan. We just have a few more minutes, but there are a couple of, I think there's some related questions over here that I want to aggregate into one. And they come from you, talking about how citizen science can be such a powerful tool for children's education. And so do you feel then that so environmental education as a curricular exercise, you've said, is not really working in the way in which it's taught us?
There's a huge amount of research there, yeah.
Yeah. No, I didn't mean you asserted it just out of nowhere. On the other hand, you said that citizen science, which has all the qualities that you said, it's about action and it's about local relevance and all that sort of thing, that can be much more powerful. So does that mean then citizen science needs to be integrated into our schooling and into the general way in which you think about schooling in the country, government schooling, private schooling, and everything? And if that is the conclusion, then how do we do that?
I think one thing, in fact, the last few days I've been writing about kind of very initial thoughts is that could we can, as practitioners of citizen science, if we could collaborate and if somebody could be anchor point to this, I'd love to collaborate on this, is to create a curriculum like NCF has done for birds, looking at citizen science as first a process of knowledge making as a community process. So one of the things I have throughout my curriculum is conversations. So when I talk my urban wilderness walks internship, the first assignment is to collect local environmental histories from 5 people in your locality with diverse social backgrounds. So it could be your grandmother and then the driver and then the waste collector, and how that place has changed over time. It's a form of citizen science. The practice of citizen science is prevalent there because it's local knowledge making. In some sense, there will be a giving back. Yeah. So how this can be practiced as a process, curricularly aligned, one of the things, ways to enter school is look at different concepts being covered in biology and humanities, this thing, and say, you do this activity, a little bit of this is covered. That's the kind of entry point. And then also look at, okay, eBird. What are 10 different ways in which activities children can do in terms of basic identification, research, some sort of action, poster making, portfolio project, and then using that data in some form. For the senior children. Yeah. let's take iNaturalist. iNaturalist project has some very creative projects which are on there. I think it's time, like recently, Pankaj Seksharia released that beautiful book on citizen science in India. A curriculum would help teachers, and it's also easier to induct them. If they have an idea of a few of these activities, how to do it, and then there will be so much more brainstorming around this.
Yeah,
I think we should do that.
Yeah, so that's great. That leads me to my last question, which you answered partially. A question from Shannon, which is that what can we as a community, that is a community of people who are passionate about citizen science and about biodiversity and the intersection between the two, what can we do collectively to more fully realize what you are talking about? One of the things that you just mentioned is about coming together to create a sensible and thoughtful citizen science curriculum that I suppose can be locally tailored and made relevant for different audiences. Is there anything else that comes to your mind or what we can do collectively?
Yeah, one more is to kind of strongly acknowledge that citizen science can be a great tool for climate action in a very powerful way, in diverse ways, and see if the various citizen science initiatives we are taking, if we can, even if it's not direct, I mean, to count birds is climate action. Why not? If we can build a lens into that, of saying, migratory birds are being impacted by climate, so on and so forth. We are collecting this. Later on, maybe this data could be analyzed in this way to understand climate impacts, whatever. I think it would go a long way in creating awareness. Is a very lousy word in my sense, but some sort of a participation in this and an induction into climate action in ways in which is accessible to everybody. I'm not sharing something which is fully formed in me, so I'm struggling for the words. But in every kind of citizen science project, if this climate thing is, I think if there are local or large scale either building of climate resilience or even reversals happening, if we see those miracles, I think citizen science, or at least the process of citizen science, would play a major role.
Great, thanks, Yuvan. I think that that gives some good ideas for starting points. And the idea of this conference really is not just to tell each other what our thoughts are and what we are doing, but also to see if there are commonalities that we can begin working on together. And of course, those have to emerge organically. So let's see what people's reactions to these thoughts are, Yuvan. And thank you for sharing them with us. We're very grateful, and I hope you can stay on for the rest of the conference and continue to interact over Discord. There will be questions. One of the reasons we use this platform is that people may not have been free at 10 o'clock, but they become free at 10:30 and begin watching the stream from the start or even later in the day. And so questions and comments will continue to come in all of today as well as in subsequent days. So everybody, please do continue interacting. Thanks, Yuvan. So I think we are going to move now in a few minutes, not quite yet, but at 11 o'clock to our next session. So we might, Akshata, are we going to a small break while we prepare the technical bits for the next session?
Yes.
Okay.
4 minutes.
All right. All right.
Thank you so much, Yuvan.
Thank you all. Thanks, Yuvan. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank you, Yuvan. I just want to say